Craig, I want to ask you something. It's something that we never delved into before. I want to talk about Craig Pinkney, the criminologist, from a personal point of view. You do a lot of this work. We see you in schools speaking to young kids. As you mentioned earlier, you've been across young people who have later lost their lives, later been, done for murder. How does it affect you personally from a mental point of view? I mean, it's not an easy type of work to get into. Is like I say, we just see you, see what you do in front of the screens. But for you personally, how difficult is it sometimes, and how testing is it mentally for you to understand things that are going on and keep a professional head on?
So it's a deep question. It's something that we have to, I have to think about. And I'm glad you have to ask that question, because people don't often, they look at the successes. People look at the successes, but they don't often look at the struggle, or they don't even ask, how did you get to the place that you are right now? I've been doing this work for 15 years now. And it's been testing. Not just personally, but mentally, as you've just asked. I spent hours, I remember hours in the library, hours, losing sleep to try and understand my people, to understand why. Why do we do the things that we do? Why do we behave the way that we behave? But part of that answering or asking the why and learning what that why was also required me being amongst individuals that committed the acts in which I was trying to discover that why. Honestly, I didn't expect to be amongst families, mothers, fathers, crying. Like, I said this to someone before, like when you hear a mum cry from like the bottom of her stomach, that's a hard thing to hear,
I was going to say, like, how traumatic is that?
Very traumatic. I would say to the point where I have now, and I think a lot of people that are watching this and those that work on the front line will respect it, I've become so desensitized to the madness. I think that I might need to have therapy. And it's interesting, I was talking to someone on the weekend and they were saying that, how often do, workers, have counsellors? I'm saying, yeah, it's something that we acknowledge, but not many of us actually go through it. And I'll tell you why it's important, because, I'll share something with you that I've become ill from this type of work. I've ended up in hospital numerous times, stress related. I've been at points where I'm in hospital for a few days, like doctors don't know what's wrong with me. But I always say that on the outside, we might be displaying that we're fine, but inside, internally, we can't see what's taking place. And stress creates all kind of chemical imbalances in the body that we can't see. So burnout's real. Trauma's real. When you're working with people and trying to explore their trauma and to explore what it is that makes them do the things that they do, part of you takes that as well. And I think we don't really acknowledge that. And then we try and kind of detach ourselves to that and try and live our normal lives. And it doesn't operate like that. Sometimes I can't sleep. Sometimes I'm up late hours of the night and, thinking that, I'm just, restless. But actually, when you look at what trauma is and the symptoms of trauma, a lot of us display those types of behaviors. I'll give you another example. I was observing a murder case, and one of the young men, or a couple of the young men that I work with, got the verdict was guilty, and they was both given life sentences. And I remember walking out the court, and I couldn't feel my legs. My legs felt like jelly. And I was just kind of sitting there for a moment like, what's the point? What's the point? Like, what is the point of doing all of this work? And then you have people in the community that will tell you that you're not doing enough. You'll have people in the community that will say, you ain't doing the right thing. You'll have people in the community that will say things like, you know what, you ain't real. But you're dealing with trauma in the community. You're dealing with families. And the reality is, despite what people think about you, someone's got to still speak to that mom. Someone's got to still speak to that dad. Someone's still got to speak to those siblings when they want to react and respond to those issues that people tell you that you're not doing. So it's kind of trauma, chaos that kind of comes from all different types of angles. You've got the issue you're dealing with or trying to make sense. Then you've got the authorities that are looking at you like, well, where do you stand or where do you sit within this particular situation? You've got victims and perpetrators looking at you like, what are you all about? What you doing?
Side you on.
Then you have, people in the community that view you one way but actually don't know what you're doing, and they've got something to say. Then you've got work, and then you've got family, and then you're trying to deal with all of these different types of things and create that balance. So one of the things that I try to do is find ways that I can, offload in other ways, because I believe that you need to have that balance. And part of that balance is, ensuring that, your physical and mental health is sound. So I go to the gym, I go on holidays, I go spas, I chill out and do different types of things with the mandem or whatever, and try and escape that being in the community 24/7. I do this thing called plugging out the matrix. So I just lock off social media platforms. I keep my professional networks open, but all the personal ones, won't use them for a short time, because you kind of need to recharge the mind. You kind of need to, reevaluate. You kind of need to step out of that matrix to look at what's happening and then plug back in. And when you plug back in, I kind of find myself being recharged, more effective in the things that I'm doing. But I think that I'm so numb to most things now. It shows that there's an issue with my mental health. Has to be. I have, with the recent cases of murders, some of them I've been to, or made contact with those families and spoke to mothers and fathers, and it's blank. When I, hear that someone's been stabbed or shot and a young person I've possibly worked with, I'm numb. I'm going to a funeral today. I'm like, death doesn't bother me no more. And that's happening to me as someone that's trying to work with it. So I'll go back to an earlier point, like imagine the people that live in the communities that are affected by these issues every single day. They're bound to be numb. They're bound to be desensitized to these types of issues and behaviors. So I think that many of us, including young people, and in a society and the communities that many of us live, we're all walking around with undiagnosed trauma. And I think that undiagnosed trauma, when not recognized and acknowledged, might be the reason why some of us behave the ways that we do. So whereas we might physically get sick, mentally get ill, or we project our issues and our problems on other people because of our traumas, that's what happens. But none of this works easy. I don't know a day in this work where I've kind of felt that, you know what? I like doing this work. It's not for everyone. So I have to kind of think about, some of the positive aspects to the work, and I think that's what keeps the fire burning. So when I get an email from a mum saying, you know what, Craig, thank you for helping out my son or helping out my daughter because now they've gone on to college or university, or, you know what, Craig, thanks for reasoning with my son that day because you know what, everything that we've been saying to him, he was going through one ear and coming out the other, and all it took was for you to come and just say that one thing, which we've all been saying, and now it makes sense to him. That teacher coming in saying, you know what, do you remember when you was working with those small groups of young people? This is what they're doing now, or I'm driving around, or I'm somewhere eating with my family, and someone says, yo, Wagwan, do you remember me? You did that thing with me right now. So what you doing now, big man? What you doing with yourself? Like, oh yeah, I'm working for an IT company now. That's what keeps the fire burning, and that's what keeps my motivation, because if you don't have something that motivates you in this work and you ain't passionate about this type of work, forget about it. forget about it. Because if it's only based on economic means, if this work is only based on the fact that you're trying to just get an opportunity to do something, forget about it. All I ever want to do is just reduce violence in my community. I want to be in an environment where I can say, you know what, I'm comfortable to be in my area. I'm comfortable for my kids to grow up in the same areas where I grew up, with them not having to go through some of the key issues and some of the things that I went through. But many of us are walking around with undiagnosed trauma. And I think that's real.